Hey, hey, it's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, and self publisher. I share my creative process here with you online. If you would like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, get access to an online digital archive where you can read my comic books, access to a Patreon exclusive Discord server where we share works in progress, tips, tools, feedback, general art shop talk, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI and sign up. If you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you're digitally on Comixology or Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That'll forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It is a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. You can also pick up Morning Star. It tells the story of Lucifer's fall from heaven as a Western. It's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains issues 5 through 8, the conclusion to the series. Both volumes have extensive back matter, script excerpts, thumbnails, page layouts, character designs, and more. Basically, I'll show you how I put the whole comic book together. Check all those out at amazon.jeremy.net. And if you head over to the homepage of my my YouTube channel, there are book flip throughs of each of the books. So you can check out what's inside. All right. So what am I up to today? What am I doing? What's going on? What is on the drawing table, as it were? All right. So this particular piece that I've been calling Gorgon Emerging is done. As far as I'm concerned, this is a finished piece. You know, I brought it all the way through. You know, the reds with the cool light. Now, as you guys remember, I was doing multiple color sketches, color studies to work out different styles. Hey, I see Omar's in the chat. Hey, how you doing, Omar? Thanks for popping by. Good to see you. Let's see here. Oh yeah, so I finished this piece. I have 2 more different studies that I did that were all rated kind of about the same in terms of like the level of, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10. This one and then the other one that was highly rated was the blue study. So I have switched over to that now. Oh, one other thing. My homework for the rest of this week is to get this one formatted and uploaded to my printer so I can start selling prints of it. So I don't have prints up yet. The prints should be the one that was you know, this is one that should be available later this week. And then also I have an alternate version that's clipped out where it's just the artwork without the background. This one's going to go on t-shirts. So I need to get those done as my homework this week. And yes, Omar says I'm the one who tagged you on my art. Yes, I totally remember. I left you a bunch of notes. I thought that you had a lot of, you know, a strong drawing base. There were little background, there were details in terms of the storytelling that I had left some notes that I mentioned. There were some things that might help with making the actual inking and the line weights more clear. But overall, so you're onto a really promising start. Actually, there was one page that I had mentioned that I thought if you would be okay with it at some point, I'd like to bring that page onto the stream and maybe do a draw over on it, just showing how I might change some of the page layout to make it flow better. But no need to answer now. You can message me back. You can let me know if that's okay with you. And if you do feel comfortable with it, I think it's something that a lot of people watching might get a lot of benefit from, just in terms of seeing how you can tweak your page to make it read better. That's all. But yeah, I totally remember your work, and thank you for sharing it with me. Coffee sip. All right. Anyway. Gonna make prints and t-shirts out of this particular piece. This is the t-shirt version where it's just the background is clipped out. And then this is the one that I'm now doing color revisions on. Oh, yeah. Omar says it is totally okay. Well, great. Thanks. I'm glad to hear it. I will, you know what? I will save that page, and on next week's live stream, I will do a draw over of it. Cool. Thank you. So, what I'm doing here now, what I basically did with this piece when I was making it is I tried to separate the layers into just my basic backgrounds, a layer for shadows, reflected light, local tone, lights, highlights, and now I'm just going through and tweaking all of them. And I think the only real problem that I'm having is that trying to get some of the areas, I want some of these shadows as they get cooler to also get redder. Like for instance, if you look at how orange the light is in this particular snake that's kind of in the center of the screen, and then you look at the one that's off to the side that's redder. What I want is as the lights move off from the orange, I want them like the orange light is supposed to be the warmest light. And then as we're getting further and further away from it, I want to go from orange to slightly red. And in terms of adjusting with hue saturation layers, that worked fine because the I have parts of the outer parts of the image are masked off, so I can change the colors of those snakes that are out there. But the ones that are in this center part, right in here, I need to figure out the best way to adjust the color without destroying the color that is, well, actually, you know what? It's stupid. That is what this thing has a pencil mode for in the hue saturation layer. So I am going to try doing this in a method that's a little bit different than I normally do. Let's see here. Merkidian Merchant is in the chat. How you doing? Thanks for popping up. Thanks for showing up here. Let's see here. All right. So let's see. All right. Sometimes when I'm first starting up on doing a piece, or anytime I start working on something, even if it's something that's pretty far along like this, there's a point where my brain is kind of like a computer booting up, like the spinning ball on a Mac, when it's waiting and waiting and waiting. My brain's just like, all right, what do I want to do? How do I want to do this? What's the best way to go about it? So I'm starting by trying to isolate with a selection the snakes that are in this front area. So, all right. So I've got the snakes selected. Now, unlike Photoshop, where it shows you marching ants, with Procreate, it's probably hard for you to see, but there's just a sort of line similar to the marching ants that are going across the areas that are masked out, and then the areas without that are the areas that are selected. So basically, it's the same silhouette that I would be using for sort of the t-shirt part. And I'm going to try out a new approach, which I almost never use the pencil mode when I'm doing hue saturation, but I'm going to try it now. And what I'm going to do here is see if it will switch to pencil mode. And let's just see what happens if I move the hue way over. Okay, I see how this works now. So this brush is basically painting where I want the hue to change. And I am curious. Oh, it's using my generals. All right. It's on that brush pack that I have for charcoal drawings, the Lane Brown pack. Oh, Mercidian Merchant says, my commission got finished. May I share? You are more than welcome to share. In fact, you know what? When Omar tagged me on Instagram, that worked so well that I think from now on, if anybody wants to share work with me, wants me to take a look at it, get some feedback or commentary, just tag me on Instagram. My Instagram tag, it's just Jeremy B, and it should be in the comments for this live stream. So if you want, go ahead, just tag me that way. I'll take a look at it, and yeah, I think that works well. Let's see, Sir, see Smith's in the chat. Hey, how you doing? Thanks for popping in. Good to see you as always. All right. So what I want to do right now is just adjust to a soft brush, and I also want to tweak this. Let's see, that's greens. Okay. I just want to tweak this now until I get it into the color range that I want. And now I can just sort of come in here and see the opacity is a little bit low. Let me bump that opacity up. Check the brush size. Yeah, all right, here we go. So this seems to be working okay. I think I can move the opacity all the way up. If I need to kick it back down, I will. And I think what's interesting about this is that, you know, I've been using Photoshop for so many years. I'm used to having a specific way of making revisions and changes to a piece. So it's a little bit like, it's not starting from scratch, but it is interesting to have to find a new workflow for certain problems. And just say, all right, I can get the same effect that I'm trying to do, but I have to find a new tool or a new way of doing it. So now I can see that I want to push this a little bit more saturated. Because what I'm basically trying to do is I'm trying to get this this snake that's in the center of the screen here, that's kind of towards the bottom, I want to get its tones to match the tones of the snake that's directly above it, that's curled up with its nose against the body. And if anything, I want it to be either match that or slightly more orange and slightly brighter, because it's a focal point. The ones that are full on orange, those are the ones that are being really hit by the light that's from above, the orange light. The ones that are further outside, they're just supposed to be getting less of the light, hence them being cooler and darker and less saturated. So that is the lighting logic that I'm operating with at the moment. I try to spend a lot of time thinking more about warm and cool versus light and dark, because you can create, you can have a very, very bright, you can have like a high key image where a lot of stuff is bright, and still get contrast simply by having things going from warm light to cool light. I mean, value shifts are still, I think, the predominant way to, you know, to establish the look of a piece. But if you have your values working well, you can do it all in one hue if you need to or want to. Let's see. So this is a little too cool. Let's bring it back into the oranges. We're pretty close now. Pretty close. And maybe I want to brighten it. Well, no, I don't think I want to brighten it a tiny bit. I think that that's just right. Now, see, the challenge here is oh, yeah, I got to undo that. The hue saturation layer, once I get to something that has already been hue saturated adjusted, is now shifting like the areas that are already orangey, it's shifting those. Because what it's doing is it's hue shifting wherever I paint. And the orange ones are already the hue that I want. So if I paint into those, it's going to shift it into a color that I do not want. But I thought I had it looking orange, and now it's back to looking purple again. Subtle tweaks here. And I think what I'm going to have to do is get this just the way I want it with these snakes in the lower part, and then go back and tweak. There's one snake that's towards the front that I shifted too much to the red. I kind of have to fix them. Let's see if I can get this just about where I want it. All right, I think that is good. Let's apply. And now what I need to do is with this same section selected, do it again. And now well, that's weird. It's not giving me the little screen at the top to ask me if I want to use pencil or let me turn the saturation way. Okay, there we go. Now that I've made an adjustment, no, that is not what I want. What I want is to do this with the pencil, and it should go, all right, that is absolutely not what I want there. Let's cancel. I said cancel? Cancel or undo? What is this doing? Hello? Thought one of the cats in the background was hiding under my desk or something. All right. What I'm trying to do is just actually here, it's the easiest way is just do that and then undo. Why is this okay? The undoing is a little bit frustrating with this. In fact, you know what? I get the feeling that having the selections may not actually be helping me here. Let me just deselect altogether. What I'm trying to do is this little snake that's right here in the middle. I want to push him back into the oranges while everything else, because it shifted to the red too much. So what I need to do, first I need to blow my nose. Pardon me for that. I mean, it's a little bit weird because I've been using Procreate for a couple of years now, but I really use it just for drawing and painting. The whole workflow for just editing a piece, I don't have that down yet. It's not like I can super quickly just run through all of the changes that I want to make. But we're going to try the hue, saturation, brightness again. We're going to switch it to pencil so it won't affect the whole layer. I'm going to turn the saturation way up so I can see what I'm doing. And I presume that it's set on a slider where it's already at the color that it, that is currently selected. So I'm going to move my hue to something different. And I'm going to try painting over here. All right, so that's going to show me what the color is right now. And I want to shift that instead of a pink, I want it to go back to the oranges that are, oh, see, now this gets challenging. Because it's changing everything. So it's shifting this, but it's also shifting the colors underneath. And I don't want to shift the colors underneath. That one snake is screwing everything. All right. So I kind of got to decide a different way to tackle this. And I think what I'm going to do is instead of doing a hue saturation, I am going to first cancel. And then let's just alpha lock this layer. Alpha locking is locking it so that all of the pixels that are transparent cannot be painted on. So only something that already has color on it can be colored. And then from this, I'm going to try and let's switch back to my my favorite blocky pressure brush here. And now I'm gonna have to play with this a little bit and see if I can change the, you know how like when you paint in Photoshop, the same way you have opacity layers, overlay, hard light, that sort of thing. Let's see here. A Beckles says, this is pretty sick. Love the colors. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Colors are actually something that I consider sort of my probably the thing that I can think I'm the weakest at. So when I do color, I like my buddy Carl Altstetter likes to joke that I tend to color with a bag of Skittles. Like I'm just throwing it in all bright, super crazy colors, and he's not wrong. I am just trying to decide. Let's see here, burnt edges. Okay, that's what I was looking for, blend mode for the rendering. And I'm gonna go from normal to overlay, and we'll see how overlay works. I may have to mess with this a few different times before I get something that actually does what I want it to. But we're gonna start with overlay with everything else being transparent with the alpha lock on. So the rest of these should be transparent pixels. And what I'm hoping this will do is it'll give me a color that, let me undo that. Let's see what happens if I just paint over. All right, so that's way too harsh. What I'm trying to do is see if I can find a color in overlay that will kind of adjust all of these to the hue that I want. So I want it to be a little more yellow. And probably a little, I don't want it to be desaturated, but I don't want it to oversaturate the other areas around here. So it is giving me a little bit of a color range, but that's still off. I get the feeling that overlay is not going to cut it. But let's just see what happens if I just go full orange. Well, not full orange, but like a much more yellowy. All right, that's closer to what I want. I mean, what kind of sucks here is that for the most part, this actually isn't bad. It's just the, you know what? I could spend all this time fighting this, or I can just go in here, select the color I want, and just repaint those particular scales, which actually sounds like that's going to be quicker than trying to find a ton of shortcuts to get the effect I want. It's something I talk about with my coworkers sometimes, is that we spend all these time trying to find Photoshop and Illustrator and digital shortcuts to fix problems. And those shortcuts are very important. They can be incredible time savers. However, there are times. No, sorry, I'm not gonna start jukeboxing. There are times when the easiest answer is just paint it again right. And you can get lost in trying to find a dozen different tricks and shortcuts instead of just going in and saying, all right, I'm just going to repaint this to look like how I want it to look, instead of trying to manipulate it digitally into something. And I think this is one of those scenarios where if I keep trying to sit here and tweak and adjust and find ways to paint it back to how it looked before I started adjusting the colors around it, I might just end up wasting a ton of time. Because really, look, I just came in here, 30 seconds, repainted the scales I wanted, the color I want, and we're good. Yeah, that's all it needed. I sat there trying to do all these tricks and running around and manipulations. That's all it needed. But I do want to come in here and paint a little bit of this red back in. Where's the layer with the, oh, okay. So this is a process now. So now that I've got these colors laid in, the next step is just moving to, although I'm wondering if I need to push the layers where the colors are dropping off, basically right here, where it's dropping off from the reds into almost nothingness. I feel like those might need to, they probably should be redder. I am going to regret this, but I'm going to try messing with the hue saturation one more time, because I want to see if I can go and select just the shadows and shift those. So one more time, and if not, I'll move on to the other layers. Oh wait, see, no, that's the problem. The hue saturation does not let you, or at least as far as I can tell, I have not found a setting where it lets you go from highlights to midtones to shadows. Whereas color balance, down here, you can go to shadows and you can just adjust the shadows. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try and make the shadows just a little redder and see what happens. Well, let's see what happens if I move it a lot. If I move it a lot, it doesn't seem to give me anything. Let's see what happens if I make them more orange or more yellow. Not a lot. Okay, there we go. A little more magenta. There we go. We get a little pop there. Because what's happening is, and I really do feel like I need to pull back on the saturation on this whole thing a little bit because it's buzzing. I like that, but it's a bit much. I don't like. This is what, if we're working in Photoshop, we would be calling out a gamut. It is like definitely beyond what I think can be printed reasonably. But what I'm trying to achieve here is that beneath the really saturated orange is a reddish orange. And the problem is that it goes from orange to red, which is a cooler color, and then the darker color where it's falling off is back to orange. So there's kind of a disconnect in terms of the hue shifting. And by pushing that undercolor, that third tone, to a redder value, that's kind of creating more of a cohesion in the light. So let's see here. Yeah, that I think works. That helps. That seems to work for everything. All right. Sometimes I've got to turn off. I have a little thumbnail. Those color studies that I've been working on and sharing online, I've got the color study for each one sort of in the file to look at for reference as I'm working. But sometimes I need to just turn that off and just look at the piece on its own and just evaluate how it's coming along. And I'm not going to do it yet, but I do feel tempted to cut down the saturation on all of the light areas that are kind of outside of, like, once you get outside of sort of the halo of her head, to cut the saturation back on all of those just so they feel like they're as colors get darker, they also desaturate because you don't have saturation without light, so because that's what the saturation is. It's when you see light reflected into your eyes from bouncing back from the object, the intensity of the light describes how intense you're going to see that color. So if you're seeing something that's in a darker area or being hit by less light, that color is going to be less intense. The intensity has nothing to do with how bright, or well, I mean, to some degree, it does have to do with how bright or dark the local value of the object is. If you have something that's gray and you shine a super bright, intense light at it, it's still going to be gray, but it'll be gray affected by the quality of that light. However, if you move something into the dark, it doesn't matter whether it's neon colored, it's still going to look dull because it's not being hit by a bright light. So that the quality of the color of that object isn't being transmitted because the light isn't transmitting as much of it, if that makes any sense. And A. Beckles says, oh, okay, so you work from a thumbnail even for coloring. Yes, I am a thumbnail fiend. I'm like a crackhead with thumbnails. I can't stay away from them. Well, the big reason for that is because I find if I just start a piece and just work forward, I end up making a lot of missteps and changes and mistakes and restarts. And just I've done it enough times that it is easier for me if I pull out of this file real quick and go back to these are the color studies that I was working on for this piece. And I knew that the one that I started with was this very first one. That's a very, very dark green. So it was me just saying, snake's green. I want the woman to be dark skinned. So it was just starting with what I had in my head. And then from there, me saying, all right, well, that's a really dark piece. What happens if I lighten it up? And then from there, I just started playing with warm colors, with a cool light with a warm base, and then warm light with a cool base. And then from there, pushing that and going to extremes of warms and cools. That's how I ended up with this whole color range that you see here, is just by going through that. My point is, as opposed to starting with a single piece and just working till it's done, I find that I save way more time by doing multiple studies. That is not true for every artist. This is about how your personal brain works and processes information and makes decisions. What works for me may not work for you. You need to, this is one of those complicated things where giving art advice is dangerous because everybody's brain does things differently, interprets things differently. And you need to find the thing that helps you the most. For me, I go down a lot of blind alleys. So what helps me is to explore all of those blind alleys in the thumbnail stage until I land on something I like. Now, ironically, out of all of these studies, my favorite is this one. This bluish light with a kind of a warm gray base. That's my favorite out of all of these. I posted them on Instagram, and the favorites by far, the red one that I did first was number 1. The blue with orange light, which is the one that I'm currently working on, was number 2. And then number 3 was the green, and it was kind of a tie between the lighter green and the darker green. I guess because they look similar enough that people couldn't really decide. I think in the end, I'm gonna go with the lighter green simply because I think that you lose too much. I think it's a little too murky when I go with the really dark one. Now you're kind of fighting to see what's in there or understand what's in there, and I think the lighter one just does a little bit more work. That said, I may still make a version of the one that I like just for me. You know, just make a print of that, hang it on my wall. That's my personal work. But I wanted to just sort of see what happens if I just release the pieces to the internet and see what people respond to. And what they responded to were the red and the blue, really, really strong. So, all right. I mean, it's not like, I mean, I made all of these. So it's like, I don't feel bad about picking one that wasn't my number 1 favorite because they're all things that I made. And, you know, in theory, I would be happy with all of them. I'm proud of, I don't feel like I put out any thumbnails that I was ashamed of. That's the point. It's not like I made something simply because this is a color that I think people will like. I made all these and I thought all of these look relatively cool. I still have trouble deciding, so let's open it up to the world. Let's see here. And James is in the chat. James says, I played around with drawing creatures a bit this past week, trying to get a more menacing shape with teeth. You know, I'm curious, James, I can't remember if we've talked about it before, but how much do you play with reference when you're doing pieces? Like in terms of, if I were playing around with teeth shapes, honestly, like, I would spend a little bit of time drawing out of my head, but the other thing, hang on. Oh. My reference shelf is behind the Japanese screen back there. And I have this this book. I love the DK reference books. You know what? Here, I have to remember, if I forget to switch the screen back, everyone starts screaming at me in the chat, switch back to the iPad, because I have a bad habit. Whenever I switch to the big screen, I forget and then just keep drawing. But this particular book, this DK book, is just called Animal. And it's just like kind of a visual encyclopedia of all different types of species. It's got, you know, there's aardvarks and manatees in here, koalas and, you know, marsupials, all sorts of flying predators, owls and falcons. Point being is that I will just go through this book, some reptiles, like I'll just go through and look at images of nature, not necessarily to do a study of a particular animal's types of teeth, but I'll just look through and, ew, spiders. Ugh. I was looking specifically, oh yeah, carnivores. That's what I was looking for. Which is interesting because, to be honest, it still doesn't have a lot of them showing their teeth. Oh, damn. There we go. So pissed off looking wolf. Point being is that I just look at them just to see if there's anything that sparks my imagination. Sometimes reference sometimes I use reference specifically, like I need to know what this thing looks like, and I will go find reference of the thing. Sometimes reference serves the point of just, tickling the imagination, putting a little fuel in the tank to push me in a direction that I may or may not um, have. There we go. And James says, I was going off with reference. This is mostly, I had a reference for teeth before, but I'll check out that book. Yeah, it's an amazing, excellent book. But I mean, hell, even if you're just looking up Wikipedia and just looking through there and just looking at photos online, sometimes whenever I'm trying to create something that's new, having something that exists as a starting point and then saying, all right, what can make this even scarier or cooler? And that sometimes just, it gives me more options to play with. And speaking of options to play with, I think we've looked at these options long enough. We can continue now with this one, which is weird because on one hand, it feels very vivid and bright. On the other hand, when I look at it, somehow it feels kind of murky to me. I think I need to play with the base color and just raise the brightness and value just a little bit more. I think it just needs to be a tiny bit brighter. Just a tiny bit. Yeah, because it feels really dark right now. So let's go back to the old hue, saturation, brightness. And now all we're doing really is just playing really just with the brightness a little bit. Just a tiny bit. Like 2% is enough. And shifting the hue slightly more. Okay, we don't want to go orange, but there we go. Actually, maybe the hue was perfect and all it needed was a little brightness. Yeah, I think that works. Let me go up to the next layer. Same thing. Just a tiny bit brighter. I see. I need to cancel because the area inside, when I say inside, what I mean is the area that is actually the Gorgon's head with the snakes that are directly wrapped around him, all of the really orange ones. This one, the brightness is super vivid. So what I need to do is if I'm going to tweak these other areas, I need to isolate those other areas. So let me go back to the selections now, go to my save and load. Select everything except for those serpents. And now let's try this slight brightening. And something else that I like to keep in mind is that, or that I try to keep in mind, is that when I'm working on things that are going to be print, making art prints, making t-shirts, whatever, I need to be aware that colors are going to be a lot darker than what I get on my screen. So I'm trying to actually think about the fact of, all right, maybe just brighten this up, but not too much. I honestly think that when I'm done with this piece, I'm gonna do some test prints on my home printer first, and I can almost guarantee that I'm gonna have to tweak the colors on these oranges. Like they feel like insanely day glow. On my screen, they look like they're neon colors, and things that are that bright never print well. In reality, I'm probably gonna have to shift it down to something that is less vivid and maybe more yellow than orange in order to get, not that it's gonna be super yellow, but just less orangey in order to get something that actually will print well. I don't think I need to tweak this the glow that I have behind the head. I think that that works. So I guess the next step here. Oh, wait a minute. So the other thing I can do is I actually can desaturate this slightly. So let's go back to these highlights here. This is the advantage of keeping all these things on separate layers. Although I realize I just screwed things because I guess somehow I didn't paint those highlights on a separate layer. That explains why I had such a hard time tweaking the color on it, because these things should have been painted on a different layer. And I actually need to go back to my red file and make sure, because I'm going to need to know that. Go, okay, I see what I did. On this layer, I just didn't put any of those highlights on this particular snake. That explains that. Well, I guess I will have to keep that as a mental note. Or I'll probably have to go back. I know myself. I'm going to go back and repaint that in there. All right. Let's just see what happens if I bring this down a little bit in terms of saturation. I don't want it to be gray. I just want to not be neon. Well, that's fine. Taking 5% off, it's still pretty bright. All right. Let's see here. Go back in here and do any of these eyes need any tweaking? Some of them do. That's too much. Let's bring that back down. So all I'm trying to do is add sort of a light blue base to the eyes, because I have that reflected light. I mean, not reflected light, that glow, that warm light from above, really kind of saturating all of the eyes of these snakes. And I kind of want to just give them a little bit more of this blue glow that mimics the eyes of the actual Gorgon herself. What's also interesting is I find I've got this little keyboard for my for the Procreate, and I have to remind myself to stop drawing with my hands in my lap. That was a lesson that a long time ago. There was a great book called the Illustrator Wow book, and it was just a book on how to use Adobe Illustrator really well. One of the things they said was that when people are first starting to use computers and doing graphic design, you'll sit with your hand in your lap. The point is that you need your hands to do all the shortcuts, and the shortcuts are the things that are going to make you fast and efficient. And now that I'm using this keyboard, I realize that a lot of times when I'm drawing, I would just draw with my hands in my lap, maybe my hand kind of wrapped around the tablet like you're kind of holding a notebook. Um, and it's reminding me or requiring me to adjust my posture so that I am actually have one hand on this little keyboard so I can actually use shortcuts while I'm working. Something that I had fallen out of, a habit I'd fallen out of. So let's see. Byron's in the chat says, latest hack, but I'm here, loving the pop art aesthetic. Thank you, thank you. I showed a comparison a little bit earlier, and this is very different from what I had originally envisioned, but this is the direction that people like. So never let it be said on that. I don't try to be a people pleaser. All right, all right. What am I doing? So I guess at this point, the only thing I really need to work on is changing the color of this reflected light, or the light that's on the skin. Wait, before I do that, I might need to tone this down a little bit. Let's see what happens if I turn this off completely. Okay. So I could go in and darken these colors, or I could just lower the opacity a little bit. Let's see what happens if I just lower the opacity. %, opacity. Let me just zoom out. I don't know if you guys do that, but the best thing you can do when you're working on a piece to get a sense, because look at this. At this point, I'm trying to move her over to the side so that her head is right next to mine. But at this point, her head is as big as mine. But zooming out and looking at this tiny little piece helps me see what really is working and not working. And I am tempted to go in and darken some of the snakes that are sort of on a lower layer on the inside. I'm tempted. I'm tempted. Let's see here. Byron says it's definitely a shock from the dark, moody idea that I thought it was going to be. A good surprise. Well, thanks. I'm still going to do the dark, moody one, but I think I'm going to do that last. In the meantime, I'm just going to try and work my way through the color adjustments for these. I might actually be out of additional layers because there is one thing I want to try. Let me see. Am I out of layers? Yeah, maximum of 14 layers. Oh, it's because I did this at a higher scale for to blow it up as a print. Let's see here. I might really need to rework the resolution that I work at, because 14 layers just is not enough layers. You know, I can see if I hit like a maximum of 30 layers or something. I might need to tweak my my pixel size until I find one that's like, all right, I can blow this up to whatever I need. In fact, what is my canvas size? Canvas information. All right, so I'm working 48,000 pixels by 6,000 pixels. That's pretty good sized. I think maybe in the future I will knock it down to maybe 5,000 pixels and see how much space that gives me. But anyway, it's a 16 by 20 at 300 DPI. That's basically what I'm working at, because that's the size of the largest print that I make currently. All right. So let me adjust the color of this light that's from above. We're just gonna move this into that orange. Yeah, that looks nice. That actually looks really nice. It's reds. I just want to shift it to be a little bit more like a little more so it'll stand out from her skin tone. So a little bit more yellowy orange. Just so you'll actually feel like there's light on her, as opposed to just like her being brown skin and it going to an orange warmth. Hmm. I think that works. I think that works. Okay. So the last thing that I'm going to do here is I am going to turn off that reference layer before I ditch it. All right. But the only thing that seems weird is some of these snakes feel like they're just sort of floating instead of really emerging from the background. So what I want to do is go over here to my wait a minute. Before I do that, there's two things that I want to do. And by the way, just so you guys know, let's see here. Byron says 14 layers isn't enough. And he says, me has panic attack if I use more than 4 layers. Well, I guess it just comes down to everybody's approach. I mean, I've gone through phases where I've tried to do this. I mean, there was a point back when Photoshop was still pretty limited in the number of layers you could have, and you tried to keep your number of layers as short as possible. Then I've gone to the point of using layers for every little thing that I add to a piece so I can tweak and adjust everything individually. Then I've gone to honestly having layer groups in Photoshop change things a lot. And Procreate has layer groups, but being able to group things together so that I can manipulate a section en masse, but not needing to have every single piece. I think the number of layers you do depends on the type of piece you're making, because there's some cases of illustration where you really don't need, you can just paint everything on one layer. then there's the approach of like, having one layer for line art, one layer for color. And for me, the intention of doing this thing with multiple layers is doing a single piece and then doing color variations on it. Personally, I do prefer to work with fewer layers rather than more layers, but I'm not afraid to add more layers if there's something, if I see a reason why I'm going to want to manipulate whatever's on that layer separately. So I like that. I like that phrase. Byron says, I'm a serial merger, probably because most digital artists probably cause most normal digital artists panic attacks. Well, here's the thing though. What I do and what I have learned is when I run out of layers and I need to make tweaks, I'll just save a new file and I'll take the old file, I'll leave the way it is. On the new file, I'll merge whatever I need to merge to keep working forward. And to be honest, that might be a solution here, except for the fact that what I really am just going to do is get rid of the, delete that reference layer. So I'll have one more layer on this piece. But before I do that, let me go to the line art, the background snakes, and I am going to unlock and then alpha lock this layer. I'm going to switch to a soft brush, and then I am going to pick the darkest background color. So instead of masking out the background snakes, I'm just going to paint over it with the background color. Same effect. There's not really any, like, I can't tell you, oh, this is some secret hack. It's getting the same. I'm doing the same thing as you would do if you were just putting a layer mask on this and mask it out so you weren't erasing it. But all I'm doing is I'm trying to make those black lines blend in a little bit more by softly painting over them. And that's going to give me that effect of them just kind of emerging from the background as opposed to harshly standing out. And this is a technique that, I don't use Clip Studio Paint, but it should work fine in Clip Studio Paint. It should work fine in Photoshop. There's no reason why you wouldn't be able to just alpha lock a layer and just paint the background color onto that line art. And this is also a great way for doing color holds. If you're drawing a comic and you want to, have a character that has superpowers, or like Psylocke from the X-Men with her butterfly effect, or you just want to color the line art for any reason, duplicating that layer and alpha locking it is a great way to do it. And I didn't duplicate this layer because, hey, I'm out of layers. I can't really duplicate it. And B, if I really needed to change this back, I could just, the whole thing is there. I can just select it and paint it all back into black, or I can do a selection and then have it color all of the line art. I can switch the line art all back to black very quickly if I need to, is what I'm saying in a very rambly statement. So to me, it's just a form of non-destructive manipulation. So I don't feel bad about just going in here and changing it up. And I think I'm going to do that around the edges here as well. The real thing I got to do is be soft with it, because I don't want to just come in here and just immediately paint all of these lines out. I want them to be darker. I want them to be bluer, not darker. I want them to be bluer, to have more of the background color in them, but I don't want them to lose that line completely. I wanted them to lose the line a lot more in the deep background. But as I get down here on the floor, it doesn't need to. I want it to still retain some of that. So I'm just kind of lightly going through. I'm seasoning it. I'm seasoning the line art. Line art just needs a little seasoning. A little too black right now. A little too dark, a little too bold. Someday I will take that courageous. Well, I've already tried it before with results that were, let's say, mixed. Um, Leaving line art, aside and just doing a full digital painting without line art. Which you've seen me try that with the Medusa, the Gorgon and her lover. That piece was me trying not to use line art, and I did not like the way it came out. But I also don't think that I'm done with the kind of experiment anymore. All right, so we're at an hour and 6 minutes. I'm going to show you the last thing I'm going to do on this piece, and then we're going to call it a day. So I'm deleting the reference image, the thumbnail that I had, so that I can do one last thing, which is create a new layer. And this is something that I don't know for sure how well it will or won't work, but I am going to take this blue color and I am going to just paint. Is my opacity up? Oh, I'm on a soft brush. No wonder it's not showing up. Okay. I don't have anything selected, do I? Huh, okay. I guess the brush size is just really small. But this is weird. Let me make sure that my brush is not still on okay, blending mode, normal. Hmm. I have had this problem recently. In fact, when I was doing my Patreon exclusive live stream, I had to cut it short because let's see what happens if I just restart Procreate. All right. It could be that it's tripping just because I am at the maximum number of layers for this resolution, and it really is having performance issues. This could be what performance issues look like on an iPad. I haven't had it do this very often, but let's see. Okay, see now it is painting normally. And what I am going to do is just try and take some of these gaps between the snakes and just slightly darken them. Not as dark as like the background, but just pushing them back a little bit. So almost got it. Almost got it. And I need to decide how dark I want this area under here to be, because we're kind of going under a bridge. And let me change my eraser to a preferred eraser. Just adjust this shape. So I don't know whether it's going to be a low opacity that's going to look good. I don't know whether it's going to be playing with adjustment layers, or the not adjustment layers, but the blend, the layer blend mode. I'm not sure which one is going to give me the effect that I want. And a lot of times, this goes back to my very first usage of Photoshop when I was in college. As opposed to understanding the blend mode so well that I can quickly get what I want. I mean, yes, overlay and multiply are kind of the two go-tos. Those I know what they'll do. But for most pieces, it literally has always been throughout my entire career, try this layer, try that, try this setting, try that setting, but try this, and just go through the settings one by one until I find one that looks like what I want. But I encourage you to play with blend settings in that sort of manner, because you discover things that you might not have expected. I mean, like I said, just this whole pop art look to it is kind of a happy accident. So let me move this over here so I can look at the layers and see what speaks to me. Darker color doesn't really do much. Linear color shifts the hue too much, too purple. Color burn looks cool, but too saturated. Darken, multiply, I can already tell you I'm leaning towards overlay, because overlay tends not to make the colors pop too much. Because that's the thing, I'm not looking to change the saturation. I just wanted to sort of mute the colors. Like, for instance, right now, hang on, let me go back to normal. If I turn this off, what's happening is I feel like maybe the colors that are there are just a little too saturated, and I just want them to feel like they're one plane slightly deeper, one plane below the snakes that are around it. And that is what I'm playing with. So who knows? It might just be going back and adjusting I may go through all these layers and say, all right, let me just knock this down like 50% opacity and call it a day. Let's see here. Lighten, screen, all those things are going to drive it up. So I can skip through lighten, screen, add. I don't really need those. Lighter color doesn't seem to do anything at all. Overlay is pushing the saturation too much. Soft light, hard light. I know, this is riveting live streaming, isn't it? Vivid light, linear, pin, hard mix, difference. Those things I rarely use those. Subtract actually doesn't look bad. It's just a little too much. But who knows? If lowering the opacity on normal doesn't work, lowering the opacity on subtract might. Divide hue, saturation, color, luminosity. All right. Let's just right here. Let's just go to difference and bring it down to 50%. See how it looks. And go a little bit lower than that. Because that's the thing. I want it to still be in the light because it's in that area that's right around the serpent's head. I just want it to push it back just a plane. So let's see. Oh, and I see there's a little area on the side where I painted and didn't intend to. Let me go over here and erase this. Must have made a little smudge mark when I first started. All right. Trying to decide. All right, let's go back up to normal. Let's see how that looks. So normal. Oh, actually, let's see what it looks like with multiply on low opacity. That might actually, even though it shifts the hue more than I want, like it adds more saturation than I want, but it calls out the difference that I'm looking for. Yeah, that wasn't what I initially wanted, but I'm just turning this on again and off again, trying to decide whether I like that or not. Hmm. I wonder what happens if I move this underneath the light layer. Well, if it's in shadow, there shouldn't be any light hitting it. And that is the problem. I might need to completely erase those. Well, actually, no, I don't need to completely erase it because I can just move this above the light layer. Well, that's the problem. It doesn't erase it. It just makes them darker and weirder. All right, well, that is pretty much it. I just need to decide what I'm going to do with those little lights underneath. But I think that this piece is done. So I need to export this out, get these files prepped for prints and t-shirts, and hopefully next week I will have some new prints and shirts for sale. But on that note, we are wrapped up for now. And next week, I'm going to see if I can get a hold of that page I was talking to Omar about and have that. So we'll do a little bit of comic book layout draw over next week. All right. Okay. So, on that note, guys, thank you for all the great feedback and the comments and conversation. Love hanging out with you guys while I'm working. It's great times as always. If you'd like to get more of this, if you'd like to dig into some of the best art books around, do a deep dive study, we do that twice a week on Patreon. We call it Art Book Study Group. And you can get access to that along with a digital archive where you can read my comic books online. You get access to a Patreon-exclusive Discord server where we share tips, feedback, process, works in progress, just general art shop talk all throughout the week. So if you want to continue this experience and go even deeper, for as little as $2 a month, you can hop all in. There are higher tiers for higher rewards. Just head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI. Links in the description of the video. If you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you would like to get physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Comixology or Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That'll forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It is a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. You can pick up my most recent comic book, Morning Star. It tells the story of Lucifer's fall from heaven as a Western. It's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains issues 5 through 8, the conclusion to the series. Both volumes have extensive back matter, script excerpts, character sketches and thumbnails, page layouts, photo reference, and more. I basically show you how to put the whole comic book together. And you can check out book flip-throughs of the comics on the homepage of my YouTube channel. If you just scroll down, you'll see book flip-throughs for all of these. So again, guys, thank you so much for hanging out, spending time, joining me. That's it for now. Go be creative.